It is well understood that weakness invites challenge, but I think this truism doesn't go far enough, and that weakness, in fact, invites violence. In other areas of our life, we are comfortable associating a result several steps removed from an action. For example, we say if someone wants to be wealthy, it requires hard work, ignoring all the steps between hard work and wealth. Therefore, I think it is appropriate to say that weakness invites violence. Not only does weakness cause violence internationally, but it is also true at the individual personal level. Nothing makes a criminal more bold and willing to impose violence on a victim than weakness. Worse yet is when a person is both weak and defiant. A criminal or rogue nation will see that almost as a demand for violence. There are 4 types of violence we are concerned about here. The first is personal violence, where individual beef, attitudes, and tempers flare out of control and produce what the law would see as crimes of passion. The second is criminal violence that we discussed above. An excellent example of this is a mugging or home invasion. The third is national violence, or when government or groups become threats to individuals within a nation. And the fourth is international violence. Generally, this is considered war, but as the events in Israel show us, the lines can be blurred. The broad cultural acceptance of personal strength and treating it as a moral good reduces the chance of violence at all 4 of these levels. Everything I'm about to say should be self-evident, but many self-evident things need to be stated clearly and often, or people have a tendency to drift away from the truth to believe pleasant fictions of peace rather than uncomfortable truths. First, individual strength prevents personal violence. You don't need to be a cut bodybuilder with abs to display your strength, but you do need to be someone who puts in enough time at the gym or another workout method to have the muscle mass to show you are not easily trifled with. This doesn't mean a lack of body fat. Many of the most powerful lifters in the world are absolute units who don't care one iota about reducing their BMI. What they do care about is increasing their capacity. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that body fat has a deleterious effect on male hormone balance, and in a world absolutely filled with endocrine disruptors, men need every advantage they can get when enhancing their testosterone levels. I have made this claim many times and will continue to do so. If you are an able-bodied man, weakness, it is a luxury that fathers and husbands do not have. It is your personal responsibility to protect your wife and children. And if you cannot do that because of the lifestyle choices you have made, it is a personal failure. It is not just your individual personal responsibility as a man to protect yourself and to prevent threats from occurring by being a threat yourself, but you must also protect your family. That is your natural duty and responsibility given to you by God and your very nature. If your choices lead to you being unable to protect yourself and your family, I strongly suspect that borders or crosses over the line into sin. After all, the Bible says that if you do not have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. The entire point of sin is that personal choices have consequences. Not doing something is always as much of a choice as doing something, and choosing not to work out is as much a choice as choosing to work out. Again, this doesn't mean you need to be perfectly trim and look like an active duty Marine, simply that you need to have the strength to make evil men take pause. If you struggle with losing fat, as many men do today, again, endocrine disruptors in our food supply play a major role in this, you can embrace the dwarf life. You can have a big belly and still make yourself as strong as an ox. Who knows, all the extra flab could protect you from a bullet or a punch. It doesn't matter if you think you live the safest, most milquetoast suburban life. Everyone faces danger and threats on a daily basis. Eventually something will happen where being strong is a requirement, not an option. Be that a drunk neighbor or relative, or a home invasion, or even an SHTF event. Being personally strong prepares you in ways that cannot be redressed once you are in that situation. You may think you can just compensate by owning a firearm, but many people do not carry firearms in situations where crimes of passion happen, and many situations cannot necessarily be solved with a bullet. Firearms have their place, but they cannot drag your wife out of a burning building. They cannot detain an out-of-control relative without killing them, and they cannot prevent a problem from starting by causing others to inherently respect you. Guns are tools, and tools do not activate the primal parts of the human brain that make us instinctively respect or fear others. They are a temporary threat that people naturally seek to circumvent. That is why most people who carry in daily life conceal carry, because if a bad guy knows you are carrying, they will seek to take your weapon or destroy you first. It is well understood that an effeminate man with a gun will not have the same deterrent effect as a large man obviously capable of extreme violence. Humans respect humans, and rarely tools for their own sake. Sometimes humans and tools together can create an effective deterrent, but that is typically at the national stage where strategic thinking is understood and accepted. Most personal adversaries are not strategic thinkers. That is why mafia shows are so popular. They place strategic thinkers in more approachable positions where individuals can more easily insert themselves for the story. It is well known that an armed society is a polite society. When you are strong, you are always armed in a way. You will find people respond better to you personally, professionally, and in a heated situation or emergency. Being strong is nothing but good on a personal level, and it is your responsibility to achieve that. Criminals are also opportunists. Seldom is a criminal a true predator in the natural sense. Instead, they are opportunistic ambush hunters who will only attack what they see as weakness or distress. It is the young woman or old grandpa they follow into the dark alley, and not your jacked cousin who has the shoulders to show he lifts 220. At the national level, the lines between personal lethality and tools blur even further. This is why the Second Amendment is a thing. Those who tell you that our right to bear arms exists for hunting or protection against criminals are lying to you. If you have even the most basic constitutional education or read anything written about the Bill of Rights by those who wrote and signed it, you would know that the amendment exists entirely to keep the government in check. It is to provide the strength necessary for people to throw off the government should it become tyrannical. That is why actual constitutionalists consider any gun law to be unconstitutional. It is intended to keep citizens on par with the government. So if the government is allowed to have machine guns and warships, they should be allowed to have machine guns and warships. This doesn't suddenly make murder legal, and just like today, you wouldn't have law-abiding gun owners suddenly become villains because they have a full auto instead of a semi-auto. All you would have is a government that is a bit more cautious about stepping on individual rights and enforcing absurd rules. Because remember, there is no law that the government won't kill you to enforce. This doesn't mean it will shoot you for a code infraction, but what it does mean is the chain of enforcement always leads to lethal violence. Let's say the city has a hedge height statute with a fine as a punishment. Let's say you disagree with the law and find it absurd and refuse to pay the fine. After enough fines and fees piling up, it reaches certain thresholds that allow the police to arrest you and put you before a judge. If you refuse, they will use force. If you resist, they will escalate the force until you are either captured or dead. There is literally no law that the government won't escalate enforcement until they win or you submit or you are dead. I do not advocate violent resistance, but the capacity of individuals to more effectively resist puts greater onus on local, state, and federal government to pay attention to what will happen if they try to enforce frivolous violations of individual liberty. Even today, every lawmaker should be asked if they are willing to have people killed to enforce whatever they are passing, because eventually that is the ultimate question of every law. Internationally, strength is obvious. This is the essence of MAD, or mutually assured destruction. It is only fear of retaliation that keeps evil men in check, and that applies at the petty criminal level, the domestic government level, and the international level. I am personally against war. It is a horrible thing that produces nothing and always results in the violation of individual rights, and the death of many. But I'm also extremely against allowing foreign powers to violate the rights of your citizens. If someone from another country or power invades, rapes, murders, and kidnaps people, you are obligated, both on an individual level and a national level, to prevent that from happening again by bringing the individual perpetrators to justice and showing their comrades what will happen if they try again. Nothing results in the violation of individual rights more than an invasion. So it boggles my mind that many people who advocate for individual rights are apologists for invaders like Russia and Hamas. If you believe individual rights are the most important, then all excuses and geopolitical complaints should be meaningless against the harm caused by their invasion. You must also think about what would happen to individuals in those invaded nations if the invader wins. If you or anyone else think Ukrainian citizens would have their individual rights respected more under Russia than they are under their own government, you are insane. If you think a conquering invader would treat citizens of a conquered country humanely and respect laws and order, you haven't paid attention in any history class. If you sympathize with Hamas when their stated goal is genocide and total conquest, then you aren't just a hypocrite about individual rights, you are straight up evil. You cannot protect individual rights of everyone in a war. So you must choose between protecting your citizens as much as possible or protecting the invader. And since the sole legitimate purpose of a government is the protection of their citizens, this should be a clear and easy answer. But I've gone on a tangent. The more important thing to understand is that people in dangerous regions like Eastern Europe and the Middle East respect strength. Our disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan both showed Russia and the Islamic world that we are weak, and now was the time to strike. I find it highly unlikely that Russia would have invaded Ukraine or Hamas would have invaded Israel if Trump had won the election instead of Biden. That isn't to say I'm a fan of Trump or think he is strong, only that he is far stronger than Biden and wouldn't have made these specific mistakes. A strong national defense is consistent with libertarian minarchy because the purpose of the state is the protection of individual rights. The only problem comes is when the state's defense apparatus grows so large it begins to take over other areas of life and demand onerous taxes like income or property tax. Worse yet would be a draft, which is literally the government confiscating your mind and body for its use. The reality of strength dynamics is that every individual is in a perpetual four-way Mexican standoff between themselves, criminals, their government, and foreign governments. A balance must be maintained to keep any of those three from taking over. You cannot do that if you are individually weak. This means you must be physically strong and armed. So in conclusion, this is just a really long way of saying you guys should join me at the gym. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.